Welcome to Losing a Child, Always Andy's Mom. On this podcast, we journey through the devastating experience of the death of a child. Grief is seldom discussed openly in our culture, and the death of a child makes people feel even more uncomfortable. We approach the topic openly and honestly, speaking to people who have lost loved ones and experts who help care for them. Whether you are a parent experiencing loss or someone who wants to support another going through this tragedy, this podcast strives to offer hope and help.
Welcome to episode 96 of Losing a Child, Always Andy's Mom. I'm Marcie Larson, Andy's mom. Everyone who has spent time in a hospital room knows that it gets very boring when you are in the hospital, especially if you are a kid in the hospital. Kids love to play and do all sorts of active, wonderful things. And when you're sick and in a hospital bed, it's just not any fun. Today's guest, Marcie, and her son, Michael, dealt with that during Michael's illness. And Michael took it upon himself to try to make hospital rooms just a little less boring in the form of what came to be known as Boredom Busters. Since Michael's death last year on Easter, Marcie and her family have taken it upon themselves to continue on with this legacy of Boredom Busters. So you can visit their website at boredom-busters.org and check them out and help support them in this great effort. For today, though, we get to hear more about Marcie and about Michael's story. We hear about who Michael was as a person and how he really lives on through this organization. You can get information on Boredom Busters through all of their social media contacts, as well as through all of mine. So you can go to Always Andy's Mom on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. You also can see Boredom Busters on all of those platforms as well. But for now, I just want you to enjoy hearing all about Michael. Thank you so much. I get to talk with another Marcie today. This is a first. Very exciting. Marcie interviewing Marcie.
Yeah, that's pretty funny.
I know. Now, this is a Marcie, M-A-R-C-I-E, and I am M-A-R-C-Y, but we both talked about how members of our own families have spelled the names the wrong way. So we are quite used to having our names spelled the opposite way and have no problem with it. So
that's right.
Oh. So Marcie is here today to talk about her wonderful son, Michael. So do you just want to start out by telling us all about Michael?
Okay. Michael was the youngest of my three children. He was 6 years younger than his oldest brother and 2 years younger than his sister. He was, I would say, he was the most outgoing in our family, similar to my personality. He just would talk to everybody, knew everybody, was just very well liked, and, would say hello to a stranger, help anybody who needed it. And then when he was about 10 years old, he loved sports. He was a big basketball player, played year round, always in the driveway. He was referred to as, the basketball kid, because everybody knew he was out there playing.
Really?
And then when he turned 10, he was in fourth grade, and he had taken some standardized testing, and he was a smart kid, and we got the test scores back, and some of them were so low that it didn't match the way he was. So I went to the school, and they said, it's one test one day. And then we went on vacation to the Bahamas, and we were in the resort, and we were on the way home, and he said, sometimes I forget words. And I said, what do you mean? He goes, I forget, like the thing you wear in the top of your head. And I said, a hat? And he goes, yeah, I forget words. So we came back, we went to the pediatrician, who was my cousin, and she sent us immediately for an MRI. And before I even got home, we were getting the call saying that he had a brain tumor.
Oh, my word.
So the next 2 days, we were in shock, went to a neurologist, a neurosurgeon, and he had 2 biopsies done on it. They thought it was a grade 2 astrocytoma, and it didn't need to come out right away. But what was happening was he was having seizures that we didn't even know were seizures. So 10, 15 times a day, he was having these seizures and was losing words. And so for a little over a year, he was on medication. He was seen by a neurologist at Johns Hopkins. And then after that, he'd go out of the house to play, have a seizure, come back, sleep for 3 or 4 hours. And we decided it was time to do something. So he had craniotomy done in 6th grade, and they were able to remove the entire tumor. And so he had a big scar on his head, and he grew his hair long. He didn't like people to refer to him as the kid with the brain tumor. Sure. So he, just we watched him very carefully for years. And I would say, you don't have a favorite child, but he needed more than the other 2 at that time.
Sure.
And he was home, missed school for about 2 years. So he was home with me a lot, and he went back to school in 7th grade, and 7th and 8th grade, he started to do better, and he always kind of had a little bit of issues with like organization and losing things. And we all thought that was, from his tumor. And then when he got to high school, he did fine. He played sports. He had a lot of friends. He was very active in Young Life. He was a wildlife leader for the kids in the 7th and 8th grade. He went to camp every summer. He was an avid snowboarder.
Wow, it sounds like he was able to do quite a lot then. So yes. Did he need treatment after his surgery, or was his surgery just considered curative and that was kind of the only treatment he needed then after that?
Yes, he just needed to have the MRIs every 6 months just to check. It never grew back.
And I suppose his prognosis was really quite good then when it wasn't coming back, I imagine?
Okay. Yes. So after like 4 years, they said, well, every couple of years. And then as he started to get older, he kind of fought it and said, why do I need to? I'm fine. I don't have any after effects of it. And so he graduated high school. He went to Penn State and joined a fraternity, made lots of friends, had, great 4 years there, girlfriends, everything. Life. He was traveling. He was a world traveler. My husband would take him, he went to Iceland and Tibet and, lots of different places, and then moved into his own apartment, had a great job in an accounting firm, had a serious girlfriend, and he developed a cough, and we just couldn't figure out what the cough was. So we took him to a pulmonologist, an allergist, a gastroenterologist, and nobody.
And when was this then?
This was in the fall of 2019.
Okay.
So he had been working for a couple of years.
Right. And he had been cancer-free then for a long, long time.
Right? Yeah. And they didn't even, because he had no treatment, they weren't, considering that he had cancer. So,
right.
And we just went to everywhere, but no one ever drew blood in all the visits that we went to.
Interesting.
And then his heart rate was really high. He could barely breathe. So I took him to just our general practitioner. She did an EKG and she looked at him and she said, he's very sick. Take him to the emergency room. So we took him to the emergency room, and that was like in February of 2019. And we're in the emergency room and they're doing all this blood work and everything. And one resident said, I think he has leukemia. And that was before, I think just from looking at him, he had his eyes were completely white. And so they did blood work and it came back like his platelet count was 2. And he was going to work every day. I mean, just coughing away, and then began our journey of treatment. And originally they thought it was myelodysplastic, MDS. And so, but he went through the treatment. It took a while because they wanted to consult with Hopkins. And so we started out at our local, big hospital here in Virginia. And he went through the first treatment and then another round, and he was doing great. He was feeling great. And then we were going into a bone marrow transplant.
Okay.
And my daughter and my son both tested. My daughter was the perfect match. Mm-hmm. And she did everything she could to, prepare for it. He had the bone marrow transplant. We were at Hopkins. We moved to Baltimore, and he was so compliant, and he was the kind of person that would, the cleaning person would come in and he would say, "How are you today?" And he always had things like, he would want things in his room that he could, fruit that he could offer to somebody else. And he was the one that all the nurses said, I want him tonight. I want to be his nurse, because he was on an adult floor. So he was there with people that were at least 30 years older than him.
Sure.
And he was the one doing all the laps and, talking to the nurses who were really his age. Mm-hmm. So he was ready for transplant, had transplant, and that was in July. And then in September, the cancer came back as just much worse, as AML, leukemia. Mm-hmm. And they thought maybe he had hemorrhoid surgery. And they thought that maybe some of the cells were hiding within that. And they did another round of chemo, and they could not ever get him back to remission. And then he was getting blood, platelets and blood much more often. And we would sit there and wish we could thank every person that donated that blood, because that's what was keeping him alive. Yeah. And then he got into a phase 1 clinical trial. Mm-hmm. That was very rough on him, and it damaged his lungs. And this was right around the time that COVID was starting. So he had spent a few weeks in the hospital by himself. Mm-hmm. And that's when they told him that there was nothing else. They were sending him home, and that he probably just had a couple of weeks. And he came home, but he still wanted to fight. He still wanted to do the transfusions and get more time. And we called our other 2 kids, and they came home, and we spent 5 days just as our family of 5, and playing games and eating the foods everybody liked, and just spending time together.
Oh, that's beautiful.
They both went home, and we called him palliative care. Mm-hmm. And then that was on a Friday. And by Saturday morning, it was just going downhill. And they said, we called in hospice, mm-hmm. which they sent us 3 different people. So the first person was very good. The second person was good. And he was still alert and talking. And then on Easter Sunday is when he got up. I didn't see him in his bed, and he was on full oxygen, 2 tanks. And so they came, and then they started giving him the morphine, and he was out of it from there. Never really woke up. Yeah. So that was hard. But my hardest thing was I walked out of the room. I couldn't watch him pass away.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, it's really, really hard to do. It's a hard thing to do.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And that's been one of the hardest things for me this year, just kind of on rerun thinking. Mm-hmm. Maybe I shouldn't have walked out of the room. And
no. Yeah, you do that to yourself, don't you? Glenn always
Yeah,
says all the time to me, "Don't should yourself, don't should yourself." But it's hard not to do that.
right.
It's
When
hard
I
not to do
walked
that.
out, like I laid in the bed with him and I was rubbing his leg and I was telling him it was okay. And then I walked out and his two best friends were here and my husband. His friends were like laying across him on the bed and they stayed until he passed away. And then the funeral home came. And like my other two children were here, it was like a big discussion about burial, at 27 to make that decision. And he did not want to be buried. He wanted to be cremated and his ashes spread in Yosemite, a place he had been and loved. And I asked that we be able to put down like a plaque. And we did that, attached it to my father's so that I would have a place. And he would say, I'm in you, you're in me,
Yeah.
and that to look for him in the rainbows as a white butterfly. So
That's beautiful.
yeah. So, but so I've done all the therapy and the grief counseling. And so about 8 weeks ago, I started EMDR.
Yeah. Yep.
I think that is helping me more than any of the other, medication too, but I think that's helping me more than any of the other therapies. And, and with COVID, we haven't had a celebration of life. We couldn't have people for the whole time he was sick, we couldn't have people in our house. We've been wearing masks for 2.5 years. And we let his best friends come in and then a couple of other friends that, but everybody had to get a flu shot. They had to, wash their hands, wear masks, take their shoes off before I would let anybody in the house. And so he got to spend time with his friends. And he had one very neat experience when he was in Baltimore. I was a Make-A-Wish wish granter for 12 years.
Really?
And,
wow.
Yeah. And I reached out to his favorite band that was coming to Baltimore to do a concert. And I asked if they would stop by the hospital and say hello or whatever. I'm never fully expecting to hear back from them.
What was the name of the band?
Iration. It's a reggae band a lot of them are from Hawaii, from California, Hawaii. And they came to our apartment that we were living in. And they did a concert for him in the apartment.
Oh, my word.
They brought their everything and they played for him. And then that night at the concert, they shouted out to him and said, our friend Michael. And so that was very nice. And I've kept in touch with them through the year. They've been really wonderful. So
that is beautiful.
Yeah.
What a cool story.
So that was great. When Michael was 10 and in the hospital, he was having a spinal tap and he was very nervous and anxious and, having a hard time with it. And somebody came in with like a little bag of toys for him to play with. And I remember there was a chess set and his brother sat down and they played chess and he was able to get through the procedure. And then when we left, they said that had been the last bag they had to give out. So we as a family said, we can do something. We'll start putting them together ourselves. So we called it Boredom Busters.
Yeah.
And we started actually it was shoe boxes filled with toys and games and things. And we delivered 5,000 of them over the years.
Wow. To different hospitals?
To different hospitals. And then, but it was more local.
Yeah, right.
That we were doing. And then it actually became a 501c3. We got all the paperwork the day after Michael passed away. So we had filled it out. Sweet. It took a while and we got that. And so now we're on a 501c3 and we delivered 2,000 last year all over the country now. So we ship them to Ronald McDonald houses or someone put our name on a blog, Momcology or a leukemia blog. And we ship everywhere. And so our goal this year is 2,000. And we're going to do an online auction July 31st to raise funds for it. And companies have been really good. This one, especially this Regal USA, has donated so many games and toys to us. It's a young guy who owns it, and he's been great. And so my basement looks like a toy storage room. And
so what kinds of things do you have in there? Just give us an example of what would be in a box.
Every box has, I put a regular deck of cards for the parents.
Okay.
And then games like Uno and Battleship. And we've broken them down into age groups. So like a 3 to 8-year-old will have, crayons and coloring books and stickers, other sorts of games. And I had never done, we always did them 3 to 8 and 9 to 14.
Okay.
I got a huge request from Boston Medical Center for the under 2s. Okay. So we started doing those. And then when Michael was in the hospital, he decided he wanted to give one to everybody on the floor.
Okay.
So we did young adult ones, even though the people were older. So for those, we put like a 10-foot foam cord in it.
Okay.
Because when you're laying in your hospital bed, a regular foam cord doesn't reach your bed. And an Amazon gift card and some stationery. And we put postcards from this wonderful company in Idaho, sends them to, it's called Lou Paper. And she sends them to match whatever state we're sending to. She donates them. Because when Michael was in the hospital, he wanted to send a birthday card to somebody. And I went down to the gift shop and it looked like it was from 1960.
Oh.
So I always put stamps on them so they could just write it out and send it. And I put Mad Libs in there, lots of different games, Mancala. And then when we ship them, we just have, so far this year we just counted yesterday, 471 of them.
Wow. And they just go to different hospitals and things like that?
They go to so they go to Ronald McDonald House in Baltimore. They go to Hopkins. They go to this Ullman House, which is a place in Baltimore like the Ronald McDonald House, but for young adults. There was a need for people who didn't have a place to stay during treatment. It's all free. We stayed there a couple of times when it was just my husband or I. But then somebody put it on this leukemia lymphoma website. So I started getting requests from people for individual bags. And I said, I'm happy to send you a bag, but can I send you 24 and you take them to your clinic or your hospital?
Sure.
So that's how a lot of them have been delivered. And some of our friends, my brother-in-law drove 100 of them to Boston a couple of weeks ago. And Michael volunteered at a camp called Flying Horse Farm, which is part of Paul Newman's. It's one of his camps. And they are doing it differently with COVID. It's doing it as families, but I'm going to send them a bunch of them for their weekend camp things. And really anybody that requests, I always ask, well, can I send you extra? And then I always put extra unwrapped things in for their children in addition to them taking a bag.
Yeah, that's nice. Yeah. I think back to when my foster son Valeriano had his kidney transplant. It was just before his 18th birthday, and he was in the hospital with a transplant. He had quite a few complications. So he was in the hospital with a transplant for 2-3 weeks, and then we were in the hospital I think 3 more times that summer. So it was a lot. And I know it was so important for us to have things to do. And the Child Life people would do their best, and they would bring stuff which was so helpful to be able to bring little games. You could check out games. They would do bingo like over the TV screen, so they play against each other and then win prizes. It just, you need so much to try to occupy your mind, especially when you're a little bit older like that. Like, he was almost 18, and I have to say the funniest thing was when he won this, I think with bingo, was a little Nerf gun set, little Nerf gun pistols. And so he thought it was really funny to wait for the nursing staff before they would come into the room and shoot them with
Oh,
these Nerf gun bullets when they came in. And it was hilarious. And some of the nurses just loved it, you know, and they would, and sometimes they'd come in and they'd be all prepared and like watching out if he was going to shoot him this time. And other times they'd just be completely oblivious and he would catch them off guard and get this little Nerf bullet, you know, ricocheting off the arm or something. But it just makes things a little more fun when
right.
there is just not a lot fun going on, you know,
No,
especially when, you know, he got his kidney. So at the time, his little buddy that he had, that he always did his dialysis with, interestingly, it was crazy. He was a little kid, not more than about 6, and they went every time and did dialysis together. And I remember saying to the nurse, oh, he's going to be so sad to have to do dialysis by himself. Little did I know he had gotten his kidney 12 hours before. So it turns out they were in rooms just down the hallway from each other. And like you were talking about, you know, you lived in the masks, right? Before COVID, you lived in the masks. So did we, right? When you're a transplant family, you live with the mask. Because that's just what has to happen. And so that little boy could come visit us and we could go visit them because we were both transplant families. So, you know, you're not going to be bringing illness into each other. So anyway, but, you know, those other kids, like they had 4 kids getting transplants at the same time. And all 3 of the rest of them went home. And, you know, there we still sat. So it's so helpful to have something to do.
Right. And right now with COVID, all the playrooms are shut down.
I know. Yeah, we used to go up and do that. We used to do Pop-A-Shot.
Yeah, so everything is shut down and they are so appreciative that because these are all brand new. And one company, when I first ordered from them, the stuff came and it wasn't shrink wrapped. And then I couldn't use it. And so then I reached out to them and said, is there a way you could shrink wrap each item? And they said, absolutely. You place your order and we will shrink wrap them. And so but one thing is like, I can't listen to anybody playing basketball. That's one thing that's, you know, a trigger. You know, I had a lot of triggers going to the grocery store. Michael loved Capri Suns. He would drink the 10-pack, you know, at one time. And so now I have 2 little grandsons and I think I could never see them doing that. He was actually in December, they were baptized and he was the godfather to the older, my 4.5-year-old grandson.
Wow.
My 4.5-year-old grandson at school told his teacher that his Uncle Michael came to visit him. And he's in a school that's, you know, very locked down. And they were probably alarmed. And he said, no, he's a white butterfly. Yeah. So they have kind of instilled that in them to look for him. And we gave everybody rainbow makers that you have in, you know, put in your window. And we gave them to all the Iration people and everybody that was just really close to him. And we were just looking this morning, and I think so far we have about 300 people that have responded to his celebration of life.
Yeah, you were saying that's coming up in September, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So what all are you planning to do then?
It all depends on a lot of the COVID restrictions.
Sure.
So my son and daughter-in-law and the grandchildren will come in, and my daughter, and we're having it. Michael was very involved. I was raised Jewish. So our customs were very different than and Michael really embraced Christianity and Buddhism. And so we're having it at the church that he went to. The pastor at the church has known him since he was a little boy because his son was friends with Michael and they played basketball together. So we're going to have it there and then just have some sort of figure out how you feed, 400 people. And it's going to be tough. I think people want to say, oh, but it's going to be completion for you. It's going to be closure. But
That's not a good word, actually. That's not a good
No.
word for it at all. But it will be good for you. I think it will be helpful for you because it I'm thinking back to when we had our stuff going on. Obviously it was right away, but I know I did feel, just to feel that love from other people and a little bit of
Yes.
that support from other people was tremendous, right? And it was
Yes.
in some ways really tiring, but in other ways, I felt like each person I saw, and of course it's different because I could hug them because it was, back in
Right.
2018, but they would just, every hug I got felt like they were just trying to take just a little bit of that pain and heaviness away, just so things weren't quite as heavy. And still, it was tremendously heavy. But to feel like I can take a little bit from you, just let me take a
Right.
tiny bit from you, was tremendous. Better than I
Yeah.
thought it would be, actually. And it was more of a relief, really, than I thought it would be. You just think it's,
Yeah.
so
Yeah,
so
I think that
intense and
because,
whatever.
normally somebody comes and brings you dinner and you get to hug them and talk to them,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
we just haven't had that. But I saw my sister lives in Baltimore, and we hugged for the first time a couple of weeks ago because we're both
Yeah.
vaccinated now, and we saw each other, and it was
Yeah.
just so nice to feel that, comfort from, because originally everyone was kind of pushing us to do a Zoom right away.
Yeah. And
And
I've talked to people who have done that, and I think some of them are real happy with it, and others not so much.
yeah,
So, mm-hmm.
no, because he was so outgoing. He would be, the last person to leave any event. I
Uh-huh.
mean, and what's been hard is seeing, on social media, his friends getting engaged, getting married.
Yeah.
In Virginia, we have something called Life with Cancer,
Mm-hmm.
and they are almost like child life for adults,
That's
for
nice.
older. And they immediately, before he started treatment, came in and talked to him about fertility
Yeah.
and said, chemo can destroy your fertility. And they set everything up for him to be able to store things in a cryo lab for when it was time, if he wanted children. And so that's the last thing that we haven't done, is to call them to tell them what his wishes were to
To do with that.
with that. Yeah.
What
So
are
that's
his wishes? Do you know? Did he
that
tell
he
you?
wanted them destroyed.
Yeah.
Yeah, he didn't. Yeah. So,
And I
and he
can
was
see
the
why you wouldn't want them destroyed right now.
no. Mm-mm.
No.
I
Huh.
feel like it's the only thing that's kind of living.
Right. Right.
So, and he had a very serious girlfriend that he broke up with because his doctor told him he really needed to focus on himself and not, and we moved him home, and, it was very hard. I started seeing a therapist through Life with Cancer in the very beginning to try to figure out, how did you navigate a young adult through this?
Right.
Because the decisions were his,
Yes.
not ours. And, when he was 10, they were our decisions. And
Mm-hmm.
this was very different but he was compliant. I don't think there was anything he said no to that we would have wanted him to do. And
That's truly a blessing, because
yes.
that is difficult when that happens, when it's not the same and you wish things would have been done differently.
Right. And he told me he was most worried about me. Mm-hmm. He thought, because we were so close, that it would be hardest on me. And
yeah, I wanted to go back to that a little bit, how you were saying that you were having some regrets, not sure if you did the right thing by stepping out of the room. And I just wanted to say, sometimes I think people can know when exactly they are going to die, and they can wait. So, I've told this story before, I'm pretty sure, the story of my grandmother dying. So my grandmother was dying of cancer, and my Aunt Penny, who is a listener to the show. I do shout outs to Aunt Penny all the time. But anyway, she's also the one that would spell my name wrong when I was younger. So anyway, so Aunt Penny was flying back to Iowa to be with her, and she got back. She got in the room. She said, "Mom, I'm here." I don't even think she sat with her very long at all. And she said, "Mom, I've got to go to the bathroom. I'll be right back." And she went to the bathroom, and my grandmother died while she was in the bathroom.
Wow.
So my grandma waited until she got there, but then she again waited until she left the room. You know?
Right.
And that seems so like just exactly the way she wanted to die, that she died on her terms that way. And I wonder if that was Michael a little bit. If Michael was waiting somehow until you left, so you wouldn't have to see that moment.
Right. I think so.
Yeah. And thinking of it that way, then you can take a little bit of that guilt that you're feeling that you weren't there off, because Michael probably just didn't want you to see him die, to see that moment. You know?
No, I don't think so. And like you, I lost my mother when I was 14. So I had a major loss.
Right.
It was, so I lost my mother at 14. She had been sick for a very long time, for 7 years. And then my dad lived to 101. Wow. And when he was passing away, he was in the hospital, and my brother flew in from California. My father held on and passed away when my brother got there. So I do believe that you have that some sort of power, you know. I don't know how much Michael was aware that last day, because he was on so much morphine, and they just kept giving it to him and giving it to him. But he made kind of like a choking sound. And that's when I had to walk out of the room. I said, I just can't see him, you know. My husband was there, and he said it was peaceful. He just closed his eyes, and, you know, and that was it. Yeah. So, but his friends stayed until like 3:00 in the morning, until the funeral home came, and they were great. And they have been just great calling. These were, you know, one of them is his best friend since he was 5, the other since he was like 11. And
so these are childhood friends.
Yes.
Stayed friends through adulthood.
Yes. And I see by the responses from the Evite, all of his fraternity brothers, all of his friends from Penn State are all coming in. And so I think that it will be a good way to honor him.
How long had he been out of school when this cancer came?
4 years.
Okay, so he'd been out for a little bit. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, he had lived on his own. He had lived with a roommate, with his best friend, then he lived on his own. And he was actually talking about, during the whole treatment stuff, that when he was better, he was going to move to Colorado. And one of his best friends did it. He said, I came for him, and he moved to Colorado. And, you know, he says, I think about him all the time. And the one thing my therapist did ask me the other day was, she felt like I was isolating myself, just because it's so hard to put on that smile and pretend that everything is okay when you're just dying inside. So I have been doing that.
Yeah.
But
it's good she called you out on it in a way, but it's hard to know what the best thing is, right? Because you do feel this pressure to put on this happy face and to put on this persona that is not really you when you do that. But then you feel a little guilty because you know you're not being genuine. You're not being genuine to Michael and to your truth, to how it is. And so it's hard when you feel like now you're almost like you're living a lie a little bit, you know?
Yeah. Like when people say, how do you feel? How are you?
How are you?
Well, I mean, what are you supposed to say? Fine. No, I'm not fine.
No, you're not. No, you're not. I a lot of times just say, hanging in there or doing okay or something, I don't ever really say fine or good or anything anymore. And it comes up a lot, in those kind of little conversations. And it's funny because I just yesterday saw a family, and I was sensing something was off with them from the beginning, just with some things like, so what are your plans for fall? Oh, I don't know. And she just graduated from high school. And like, I just was sensing something was a little bit off. And then it turns out that her dad had just died. Well, they didn't tell me. And so then it grew into this huge conversation then about grief, because they didn't know anything about me. They didn't know my son had died. They didn't know any of that. And so then we had a really nice, lovely conversation about grief and letting others take care of you and being okay to be genuine to yourself and to others. And because they did definitely feel this pressure, like, to not say things, right? Just be like, oh, everything's great. We just had graduation and everything's great. But it's not great. It's horrible.
Right.
It's horrible.
Right.
So anyway, it's important, I think, to try to get a good balance of what you can be open about and what you still want to keep a little bit to yourself too.
Right. Because I want to talk about him.
Sure.
I don't want him to be forgotten. But that, I've learned to say that the best thing to say is, tell me about your family. I will never say to somebody, how many kids do you have, or how old are your kids, or because when people say that to me, it's just, rattling.
That is so great, Marcie. That is, I'm going to remember that, because I don't ever ask anyone how many kids they have either anymore, because I don't want to be asked. So I never ask. But that's a beautiful substitute question to say. Tell me about your family.
Yeah. I read in one of those books.
Oh my gosh. Well, that was a brilliant thing. Whoever came up with that, I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. Yeah, we were talking about that earlier, about all these books that we have.
I know. Yes.
Yeah, because people give you all sorts of books.
Oh, yeah. Like you had said, one you had 8 of, and I thought, I think I have 3 of those upstairs. And
oh, really? Of the same book, you think?
Yeah.
Yeah, Laments for a Son? Yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, not that it's a bad book. It's a good book, but I don't, who needs 8 copies? Not me.
Right. And I don't know that reading them is, like the best thing either. I mean, just.
It really depends on where you are. There are some books that I've been given that they just sort of irritate me, because they seem, the people that wrote them seem so together. And I just feel like I'm a mess. And I don't want to read about someone who's all put together and their grief's all wrapped up in this nice little package. And I don't know if they felt pressure to write a book where it's neater, or if they're just so far out from the death that it is actually that neat. But to me, if I have to read something, I feel better reading about something that's messier. I mean, we talked about how you started following me because of Anna Winston Donaldson's book, Rare Bird. Right. And because you have a mutual friend, and she wrote about the messy stuff. Right. And I mean, that's what I do about on the podcast, is I talk about the messy stuff. I don't just talk about this rosiness, because it's not rosy.
And I think that losing a child is so different than, other people saying, oh, I lost my parent who was 95. And it's sad, but it's not the same.
I know. I mean, I lost my mom who was 42, and it's not the same. And she was 42. That's pretty young, younger than me by several years now.
Yeah.
But it's still different than my 14-year-old son. It's still, for me, not for my grandmother, obviously, but for me, was in the right order. I mean, I shouldn't be without my mom. My mom shouldn't die when I'm 21 years old. But what really shouldn't happen is have your child die.
I know.
Right, when they're a teenager. So.
Yeah, and then when you have other children, you have to figure out how to not, like my other children are older, so they're on their own, but still, I don't want them to feel like they've lost their parent, from this. But I'd love, if people who listen to it know somebody who could use our Boredom Busters, I would be happy to, if they know somebody who's battling.
So I want to know what Michael's part in that was in the Boredom Busters, because I feel like did it kind of start with him feeling like he wanted to do it, or?
It did. He started, and he, in the beginning, was the one who always picked everything out. I think, and back then we really catered to the younger kids. So it was Legos and whatever he was enjoying playing. And we did all that as our own family. So we didn't really get donations or, that was just a family project that we would do. And so he would pick everything out. We'd go to the store, and then, when Amazon was easy, we would order from Amazon. And but once we became a 501c3, sometimes I'll come home and I can't get in my front door.
Wow.
Because people, like, somebody will donate that we don't even know. And, say, I read about you in something and I want to donate. And, and now doing this auction, it's amazing the people that have said yes to donations. One of them is Art Smith, who was Oprah's chef.
Oh, okay.
He met Michael when Michael was going through his brain tumor, and he's going to do a Zoom cooking class for us with somebody. Yeah.
Okay, so what kinds of things do you have on this auction? You should promote it up a little bit.
Yeah, we have things from Lululemon. We have lots of gift cards to restaurants, that are all over the place. We have tickets to Iration. They're giving us tickets to the show in Baltimore, and then 2 tickets to anywhere else in the country that they're playing that we want. Just like golf places, and a company called Sugar Wish that sends out candy things, and just a lot of fun things. Yeah, I think it'll be fun. It's been a challenge setting it up, but
so is it an in-person auction or is it an online auction, right?
It's going to be an online. That's so what we'll do is we'll put it, so our website is boredom-busters.org. So we'll put links on there too. And then we have a Facebook and an Instagram and all that. I would stay off social media if it wasn't for Boredom Busters, because I find social media to sometimes be raw.
Yeah.
Seeing everybody on vacation, everybody, doing stuff. But Michael said, please continue my legacy through Boredom Busters. So I say each bag has a tear on it as I put them together, but it's a distraction, and I know it's making a difference.
Well, and it's something you can do still with Michael, right? It's like the two of you are doing it together, and that is such a healing thing, to be able to feel like you still have this connection to your child.
Yeah. Because Michael, I have a friend bought me a necklace of a heart, and Michael's quote was, "The purpose in life is to help others through it." Oh. And she had it put on the back of it. And that really sums up the kind of person that he was.
Yeah, it certainly sounds like it. I love that. I was just looking up something here. So Gwen and I did an episode here just a little bit ago on meaning making and finding meaning in your grief. And I was just confirming this, but your episode is going to be the one before we do our part 2 of that. And our part 2 of that is talking about things that have given your life kind of purpose, right? So what you feel like you have done in your grief that you never would have guessed you would have been able to do. Yeah, things like this.
Right.
And I feel like that's so much of what you're doing, right? I mean, you wouldn't have been able to predict that Michael's legacy could turn into this, into this program, and you could be making just kids just a little bit happier all over the world. Or I mean, all over the country for now, maybe eventually all over the world, but all over the country, just a little bit of Michael and just a little bit of, fun and laughter,
Because we put in each bag, we have a little postcard that kind of described how it started and who he was and, that. So, So, because my husband wasn't sure that we would continue with it, even though we had gotten it had taken a while to get it. And there are days I think I don't know how long I'll do it, but I know it's making a difference, and I know Michael would want me to do it. And, and once COVID is really behind us, other people can help me as opposed to it just being me, because I feel very protective of it, that I want it to be sanitary. And I know I've been vaccinated, and I know, what's safe to go in what bags. And so I've been the sole person putting them together. My husband carries the box to the post office, but I put them together.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, and I think too, even back comparing it almost to me doing this podcast, initially, I really felt like I had to do every piece of it, every single thing. I arranged everything. I edited every bit of it. I put everything, if it went on social media, I did it, even though I'm terrible at it. And now I've gotten to the point where I can let some other people do parts of it for me. And it's only because I've healed a little bit more. And I don't need to do that for my own grief and my own grief journey. So I wonder too, if as you get a little further out and maybe get through a little more healing time, if you will be able to let go of little pieces of it and let other people help you with that.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I hope so.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a sign of getting better for sure when you're able to do that. But I'm so glad I did do everything at the beginning, because I really needed to.
Right. Because it's a distraction. It's something I can go downstairs and turn the TV on and do it. And my head is just not ruminating about.
Mm-hmm. And it's something you can think, I'm just doing this with Michael. I'm doing this for Michael.
Right.
I'm doing it with Michael. It's just my Michael time.
Right.
And it's just, I think, good to be thinking about it that way.
Yeah.
Again, back to the isolation comment that your therapist made. Another thing about that is incredibly easy to do during COVID, though.
Yes.
I mean, I look at all of the people who are isolated in COVID, and you don't even have to be grieving to be isolated during COVID.
Right.
So I would almost think it would be more unusual to be a grieving person and not be isolated during this time and all that we've been going through. So, things may start to be a lot different as things open up.
Right.
And you feel
I flew, I went to Michigan to see my daughter. So that was, leaving my comfort zone, because I kind of felt when we went to Seattle last time that I was leaving Michael behind.
Yeah.
That, he's still here, and that was hard to do. This time I didn't feel as strongly about that.
Wow.
I wanted to spend time with my daughter, and I went, and we had a good time, and she too is grieving, and we were able to talk about him. And she always says, every time you think about the things he'll miss out on, think about the things he did. And so I have this little chart, and I put in there, he went to this place and he got to do this, and he did more in his 27 years some people will do in a lifetime. So
well, I certainly hope that his celebration of life, it does wonders for you, and is just so wonderful for your family. I assume there will be a little bit of reggae music.
Yeah,
You'll be playing
maybe.
some of the band.
Yeah,
Playing some,
probably.
yeah.
We'll do like a little slideshow with their music. And
I think that would be perfect. I think it
yeah,
wouldn't be right to not include them somehow.
right.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the show today and talking about Michael.
All right. Thank you so
and
much.
allowing me to talk to another Marcie. That's been fun.
Yeah, that's nice. All right. Well, let's keep in touch.
All right. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye.
Thanks for listening to Losing a Child, Always Andy's Mom. Please subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast player. We are always looking for new show ideas. If you'd like to be a guest, know someone who'd be a great guest, or have a show idea, please email us at marcie@andysmom.com. Be sure to visit the webpage, andysmom.com, for more content, including Marcie's blog. There you can also sign up to receive updates via email. Together, let's work to inspire hope, one day at a time.